Paris is the most beautiful city in the world. I love this city. I love the people who live here. And I just want to bring them the gospel because this is just amazing, the way the gospel changed me, and I want to see the same things in the lives of others.
If you go back about 15 years in France, church planting was already going on, was happening, people were doing it certainly, but the evangelical world was quite divided, not much communication, shall we say. So in 2001, there was a movement of reconciliation, in particular between some Pentecostal pastors and some of the leading classic evangelical pastors who came together. There was mutual asking of forgiveness. And that initial movement in 2001 led to the formation of what's now called the National Evangelical Council, the Conseil National des Évangéliques.
And I went in South Korea because I was visiting one of my very close friends. His church asked me to share my testimony, the way I used to live here in France, the difficulties for Christians and stuff like that. So I started to share my testimony in my own country, and the whole assembly started to cry. I asked my friend, "What's wrong? What's the problem?" And he said, "They are very sad for your country." I remember this young girl, maybe 14 years old, something like that. She raised her hand and she said, "What can I do for your country?" And it was like a slap on my face just to awake me, because I realized that I didn't have love for the lost of my own country. And I realized that God has a plan for me in my country. And I said, "Oh, I can speak French perfectly. I know the French mentality. I know the difficulties. Let's do it."
The best way for us in our society now is to evangelize by church planting. When I began to work in CNEF the first year, there are 3 pastors who did not know each other, who decided to plant a church in the same town in France, and not a very big town. So, you know, the first pastor went to the mayor of the town and he told him, "Well, I have a project to build a church in your town." On the next week, another pastor, and the next week, the third pastor went and said the same thing. And for me, that was very a pity. And that was not a good testimony for evangelicals.
Daniel Lichty was studying the question of church planting, and it came to him that what if we aimed for 1 for 10,000? Going for the base where we currently were, which was I think around 1 for 36 or 1 for 38,000, give ourselves not a kind of, oh, there's so few of us kind of look, but oh, what could we do? A kind of positive vision. And in 2010 or 2011, there was a unanimous vote of the General Assembly to say, we believe this is a project for us all, 1 for 10,000.
We organized what we call a learning community, where 9 denominations, among the biggest in France, they have worked during 3 days, 6 times, to work on about their strategy. They were speaking to one another so that every denomination knows what the other is doing.
Today in France, there's a new church planted every 10 days. That includes the closures, so that's a net 35 churches per year. We're very much aware that there's a huge amount of ground left to be covered. But when we look back 15 years ago, there's been a lot done.
We live in a place where you have 200,000 people, 12 mosques, but just one good evangelical church. And we really need more churches in this place. And that's why with my wife, we have been touched about the lack of churches and the needs of people to know the gospel, and we decided to plant a church exactly where we live. last week, I've been invited to share a meal with my neighbors, and he asked to other people to come, and we just shared a meal and stuff like that. And at a moment, a young boy, in front of everybody, he said, "Harry, I really want to know how I can pray." And I was like, "What?" And I said, "Wow, maybe I need to talk to your mom first." And he asked to his mom, "Mom, we need to go to the church and we need to hear Harry talk about Jesus." And she said, "Yes, we will go next week." And I was like, they know me, I know them. With my wife and my son, we really want to love the people in our neighborhood.
We've been involved in 10 church plants the last 10 years in Central Paris. 8 of those have been collaborative between several churches, and most of those 8 have been across denominational lines. So I would encourage every country to consider how they can communicate and collaborate across lines for the gospel. There is much to be gained from talking to each other and from considering how together we can move the gospel forward and plant churches in areas that don't have them.